Welcome to World Shakers. My name is Tim Storey. With me today is my friend, Joseph Warren. Hi, Joseph.
Hey, Tim. Glad to be on the show. Looking forward to our conversation today, sir.
You are the host of Broken Catholic, the #1 podcast on iTunes for Protestants and Catholics, okay? So we've had some great talks in the past, and you are a spiritual coach to Christian business owners and CEOs, and you have an amazing story on how you got to where you are. And you also have a business background. You did a lot by the age you were 19. As you spent a lot of years trying to find happiness through money, success, and pleasure. You made millions of dollars, but yet you felt a little bit undone on the inside. And now you are traveling and sharing your experience in all walks of life to Christian business owners, top CEOs, and you have something called the surrender principle. And the thing is that you are a minister, and you're changing lives in all different spheres of the world. And you're enjoying yourself, right, Joseph?
I'm definitely enjoying myself now. Before, when I was chasing all the things that would make me happy, I thought would make me happy, I was a miserable person on the inside. Now I'm chasing what God tells me to, and turns out that's where the joy and peace comes from.
Tell me a little bit about this whole hybrid of the secular side and the ministry side. And clearly, I understand that because of my background of going to seminary and then also doing secular things. How did you go from business to the spiritual side, or was it the spiritual side, then business? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Sure. So I think it was the spiritual side, just being raised Christian in a Christian household. And then, like many, coming from a dysfunctional home, there was a lot of love, but, parents had some issues they were working out, and divorce and childhood trauma. And then really just making a decision that, man, I don't want any part of this. If this is what faith in God looks like, I don't want anything to do with this.
Wow.
It's too much hurt. It's too much pain. It's betrayal. I never want to get hurt like that again. So I really, just closed my heart off to loving people and being loved by people. And I really bought into the media message of go get yours. And that's what I did. And, I got it. And was, as you said earlier, I was left very dissatisfied. And then in that dissatisfaction, hitting that rock bottom place, that's really where my heart was open to revisiting who is this God, and maybe he's not who was presented to me as a child, and really taking a different look through a different lens, and falling in love with God as Father rather than just someone to be feared or a tyrant. And that's really where the transition happened.
Help us with this, because when you read a lot of the reports, like this guy, George Barna, he talks about how many people were raised in the church, but yet they leave. Because we see these mega churches. We see churches like Joel Osteen's over 40,000, Craig Groeschel in Oklahoma City, over 50,000. But in the midst of all these mega churches, people are leaving churches in a mega way, okay? So question to you, when you were a young person and you looked for the church to be an oasis, was it an oasis for you or not so? Tell us your story.
Yeah, I think back then, with a very childlike faith, it was. But then when some of life's more difficult questions started to present themselves at a young age, teenage years, I really didn't get the answers within my faith to those very real world questions. So I went out into the world to get those answers. And that's a very dangerous place to go without God.
Yeah.
And I followed that path all the way, and I never got the answers. I just got brokenness and hurt and woundedness and just more of it.
Yeah.
So I think going back to what you just shared, the mega churches, why are people leaving the mega churches when they served a purpose for a certain amount of time? It seemed everybody was leaving, the traditional church and then flocking to the mega churches like they had the next new great thing. And I think we're all longing for truth, Tim, and that never goes away. It's how St. Augustine said, my heart longs for you, Lord, right? And it cannot find rest. It's restless until I rest in you.
Yeah.
And that's just a human condition. So I think a lot of the mega churches, they really have presented a feel good gospel. And people like, man, that's so much better than this like tyrannical gospel to fear God. I want that. And it's kind of like the sugar coated Wheaties. I want the Frosted Flakes, man. Give me some of that. And they ran for it, but then they found it was Frosted Flakes. It had no substance. There was no stake behind the sizzle. And of course, I'm not, painting a brush across all mega churches, but overall, there is a problem. Because if it was the complete truth, why are people leaving in the masses, like you're saying?
Yeah. Well said. So when you say broken Catholic, so first of all, I'll give you statistics that you already know. We have over 1.3 billion Catholics with a B. What a huge movement. All types of Catholics, even charismatic Catholics today who believe in healing and praying for the sick, and just amazing things happening in a positive way in the Catholic Church. So easy to hear some of the negative, but there's some great things taking place in the Catholic Church. So Joseph, when you talk about the broken Catholic, that's your podcast, what does that mean, broken Catholic?
Well, it started with me individually and personally, and coming to the realization that I was a broken Catholic myself. I didn't have it all figured out. I grew up in a faith that I do believe God's truth is present in. However, again, it was presented through some kind of dysfunction and mistruth. And, I'm a product of that. At the same time, in that brokenness is where God shows up. He shows up in our weakness. That's the promise, right? In my weakness, I'm made strong. And really just getting to that place, Tim, of just owning my own broken messness and all my poor choices over a lifetime and what it actually looked like to rely on myself and going, wow, that didn't work. Well, you know what? Maybe I should show up a little more humble and just say, listen, I'm a broken Catholic and former atheist. I was raised in faith, but then I rebelled from it. I'm no better than anyone. Actually, I'm probably worse than most because I've done worse than most or many. So I'm not here to preach at people, but I'm here to say, hey, listen, God met me in that brokenness. He met me right there.
Thing that Psalms 103, as you know, says he does not treat you as your sins deserve.
Thank God.
Then it goes on to say, for he knows your frame, which means your structure and your makeup. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is the love for those who fear him. So I think that when you did things wrong and I did things wrong and other people that are watching did things wrong, a lot of times our heart was right, but our movements were wrong. So thank God that he does not treat us as our sins deserve, right?
Yes.
So Joseph, one of the things that I'm interested with you today, because we're talking about world shakers, you are having impact on people. You are someone who is influencing people. Tell us how you're stretching out. Like, tell us about books or podcasts or TV shows or things you're working on.
Sure. As you mentioned, I have the number one podcast on iTunes for Protestants and Catholics. And I'm really standing for unifying the church as a whole and just ending all this divisiveness of making each other wrong because we worship the same God a little differently. And then I also have the number one podcast on iTunes for first 100K entrepreneurs, where I bring on successful entrepreneurs and interview them about how they made their first $100,000, because that's where I believe 90% of entrepreneurs get stuck or stopped or quit.
That's excellent.
Yeah. And so we really help them over that 100K mark. So they validate their businesses. And it's not all business, it's spiritual as well, that show. So I'm dripping, the message of God and the message of, hey, listen, I'm going to help you and my guests are going to help you make the money, but don't let that be your finish line.
Yeah. Joseph, can you tell them how they can watch the podcast as far as the young entrepreneur? Because as you said earlier, that's so important, because a lot of times we look at people like Phil Knight, who created Nike, or we look at Richard Branson and we look at them and here they are. But there's a lot of clues that we can get and insight we can get from the young entrepreneur
Mm.
or the just starting entrepreneur, you may be 60 years of age or 70, of how they almost dropped the ball before they made the first 100,000. So
Mm.
how do we watch that?
So if anybody's interested in the show, they could just go to iTunes, Spotify, any of the major platforms, Stitcher Radio, just type in your first 100K podcast, and that
Yes.
will come up. And just speaking to what you're saying there, Tim, as far as chasing the allure of money and success, and there's a lot of great people out there, and you're friends with them, and we work with the same company that works with them, and
Yeah.
and their message is good, but I think it's incomplete. It's not the total message, right? And if we somehow make God or if we make money or the pursuit of money or the obsession of money the end goal, we're left just very dissatisfied, and that could be catastrophic in a lot of people's lives. And I'll use Elon Musk as a present day example that all the young people love. Elon Musk, he's the guy. Tesla, look what he's done, and SpaceX and all this. And, I remember listening to one of his interviews a while back, and he just got real and vulnerable with the interviewee. And he's like, listen, my life's a mess. Like, my
Yeah.
personal life's a mess. Like, I'm lonely. Like, I can't even sustain a relationship. Like, I'm hurting on the inside. And then others around him in his close network describe him as working these long days and just sleeping on his couch in the office, and just not what you would think of as a thriving, life. And then, you have like James Packer, net worth $2.9 billion. And, I'll just quote him specifically. He says, business is good right now, but now my personal life is a disaster.
Yeah.
So what good is it if we chase all the money, get all the money, all this fame and success, but when we go home, we're miserable?
So Joseph, so your personal take is that life is more eternal than temporal, and that
Yes.
maybe these people that you mentioned are just chasing the temporal and not understanding the eternal. Because I find that in studying you, that's kind of what it seems that you're teaching. And so, how is that working for the people that you're coaching?
Mm. Well, it's working so good, and I don't take credit for that. Really, what I teach, you shared earlier on, I teach this underlying extreme growth principle called the surrender principle, and all it is an accelerated form of letting go of stuff and surrendering it to someone bigger than you, surrendering it to your maker, your creator, to God. And I truly have come to realize this, Tim, in my own personal life and the lives of my clients, that the number one thing that's causing most of the suffering in our lives, the number one thing, and I'm not just talking about regular human suffering, right? But I'm talking about like the suffering that we're actually somehow creating, the non-workability in our lives. The number one thing is self-reliance. It's this control freak that's going on our inner selves that needs to control every aspect of our life. We
Yeah.
try to control things, we try to control situations, we try to control people, and it's just not working. If it was, we'd be happier. But we look at the mass suicides right now, epidemic, rates right now. Why are we not happy? Right? We're popping pills. We're distracting ourselves and escaping from our reality on devices rather than going in and doing one of the most difficult things for any human, and that's to get quiet and to meet yourself.
Yes.
And as you know, this is one of the scariest things for us to do. So to answer your question in a full circle here, that's where I take my coaching clients is into that inner person, and we go to the core. And it's a lot different than the therapy or the counseling or the other coaching that's out there that really focuses on addressing the symptoms in our life,
Yeah.
making more money, getting more clients in my business. How do I, get more leads? What's my marketing strategy? And that's all good. And a lot of my clients come to me for those intentions, and we'll get those, but we do it totally differently. We say, hey, listen, you're the bottleneck in your business. Every CEO, every owner is the bottleneck in their business. And when we go in and do that heart surgery and
Yeah.
get you back into spiritual alignment, because something's off a little bit, that's why you're acting out in your life. And as soon as we realign you and get you back to source, right? Your creator, your maker, then and only then do all the symptoms go away. Or you could keep doing what you're doing and keep working on the symptoms and just ask yourself, is it working?
We're talking to Joseph Warren on World Shakers, josephwarren.net. We have about 5 minutes left. Joseph, how can people work with you? You're piquing their interests. So how can they work with you? How do they learn from you?
Sure. So if anybody's interested and you don't find my abrupt, right to the point way of being and acting too much for you, and you'd like to be called out, and that's probably what you think you need right now in your life, you could go to josephwarren.net and schedule a spiritual clarity call with me. And that's where I just sit down with your audience, your guests, Tim, and there's no charge for that. I give 30 to 45 minutes of my life and contribute to theirs. And we're going for two things, two intentions. One, to get you clarity in what do you want in your life right now.
Yes.
And the second is to see if we want to work together.
Beautiful. Have you heard of Bill Belichick, the coach of the Patriots?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He's known for getting to the point, but he's won a lot of Super Bowls.
That's what works, doesn't it?
It's working. It's working for you.
It's
and
working.
That's why people love you. And
thanks,
so
Tim.
Joseph, when you look at the world today, should we get intimidated, frustrated, or motivated? And whatever your answer is, give us a little of your thoughts. So the world, there's a lot of challenges. We got problems in the Middle East. Who's going to be president? Who is not? Who is? Challenges with fires in various places of the world, earthquakes where we wish they weren't, hurricanes. You intimidated, you're frustrated, you fearful, you motivated. Tell us how you feel.
In the past, I used to be filled with worry and anxiety about the future. I was trying to control it all, just like I think a lot of us do. So I was very intimidated back then. Now I'm not at all. I'm at peace. Some people look at me and be like, why are you so at peace, dude? One of my guys is one of the top military guys running this whole thing right now overseas. And he's like, Joseph, aren't you up on the news? I'm like, I don't really feed all of that into my brain. Instead, I would prefer, and this is for your audience, Tim, is don't be any of those things. Don't be motivated, anything. Don't be agitated. Be still. Be still.
I really like what you just said, because it's not like you have to choose one of those things to be. Be what you said. Be still and know that He is God.
Amen to that.
Joseph Warren, living life, enjoying your family. So it's possible to do all these things and still be alive in your life, right?
Yes, I still have too much time on my calendar available. And people are like, how do you do all that? I'm like, I don't. When you surrender your life to God, He multiplies your time because He's outside of space and time. He doesn't have our human limits. So if you really want to 10x your life, maximize your life, your money, all these things, be still. Go into that interior place, surrender these areas of your life you're trying to control to the only one that has control over them, and He will absolutely maximize your life.
Make sure and tell somebody to watch this, share it with somebody, share because you care. This is World Shakers with the Joseph Warren. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Tim.
Come on, you like it, right?
I like that. That was solid.
Straight to the point.
Solid.